coming up on The Golden Key.
Costly is the offering that shall cleanse your sin. Do thou fearest?
Take me, not Bernhard.
Bring the axes. The king tree of the forest must fall.
So, Claire, Veronica, Peter, Advent is winding down, so let's get ready to put up our Christmas tree.
I'm ready. We've been seeing Christmas trees for weeks now, since the start of Advent. I know we're not the only ones to put up our tree on Christmas Eve, but it sort of feels like it.
Well, that's an old custom, really. Putting up a Christmas tree during Advent only began fairly recently. A lot of people forget Advent is even a season, so now it's common to call the weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas the Christmas season.
Yeah, Advent goes back to 500 some years after Jesus, really. Christmas celebrations were called the Feast of the Nativity, still are today. That began some 300 years after Jesus.
Yeah, Advent was gradually added as a season, kind of like Lent, a time of preparation with fasting and penitence. And of course, the Christmas season lasted 12 days.
So, Christmas trees would be put up every Christmas Eve and then taken down the eve of Epiphany, the feast of the coming of the wise men.
How long have people been decorating for the season with pine trees?
Believe it or not that long in the history of Christianity, really. The evidence points to it starting in Germany in the 1500s, though people say the first Christian to do it was the Protestant reformer Martin Luther. That's really more of a legend.
Kinda like the story we're about to tell. That is, what we know about St. Boniface is true, and there's a long-standing tradition about him cutting down a certain tree. We don't have any real evidence of it, but it's an interesting tradition, many years old.
And a great story written by an American author, pastor, and professor named Henry Van Dyke called The First Christmas Tree.
We know St. Boniface was born around 675 years after Jesus in England. We definitely know he died for his faith. He was martyred on June 5th, 754 AD in Germany. His feast day is actually in June, which is a long way from Christmas. Christianity had spread across Europe by then, and certainly Germany had had Christians come in and teach about the faith.
A lot of people still focused on pagan gods and worship, like Thor.
Oh, cool, so the Avengers were there?
Peter, no.
I know, you mean the original Thor, the god of thunder.
Exactly. And Germany was still kind of out in the wildlands of Europe back then. Even though Catholic clergy had reached it, it was considered the edge of the civilized world. Our story begins at a monastery. Let me get to the first page here. Okay. It is the day before Christmas in the year of our Lord, 722. Broad snow meadows, glistening white along the banks of the river, pallid hillsides blooming with mystic roses, where the glow of the setting sun still lingered upon them. In the cloister there was silence at the sunset hour. All day long there had been a strange and joyful stir among the nuns. A breeze of curiosity and excitement had swept along the corridors and through every quiet cell. The elder sisters had been hurrying to and fro, busied with household cares. In the huge kitchen there was a bustle of hospitable preparation. The big black pots swinging from the cranes had bubbled and gurgled and shaken and sent out puffs of appetizing steam. This was a holiday. A famous visitor had come to the convent. It was Winfried of England, whose name in the Roman tongue was Boniface, and whom men called the Apostle of Germany.
So he's called Winfried here?
Yeah, he was named Boniface by the Pope in honor of an early Roman martyr, but Van Dyke calls him Winfried in most of the story. Anyway, go on.
A great preacher, a wonderful scholar. He could hardly sleep without a book under his pillow, but more than all, a great and daring traveler, a venturesome pilgrim, a high priest of romance. He had left his home and his fair estate in Wessex. He could not stay even in the rich monastery where they had chosen him as the abbot. Nothing would content him but to go out into the wild woods and preach to the heathen. Up and down through the forests of Hesse and Thuringia, and along the borders of Saxony, he had wandered for years with a handful of companions, sleeping under trees, crossing mountains and marshes. Now here, now there, never satisfied with ease and comfort, always in love with hardship and danger. What a man he was, fair and slight, but straight as a spear and strong as an oaken staff. His face was still young. The smooth skin was bronzed by wind and sun. His gray eyes, clear and kind, flashed like fire when he spoke of his adventures, and of the evil deeds of the false priests with whom he had contended. What tales he told that day, of long journeyings by sea and land, of perils in a flood, of wolves and fierce snowstorms, and black nights in a lonely forest, of dark altars of heathen gods and weird bloody sacrifices and narrow escapes. The little novices had gathered around him, and their faces had grown pale, and their eyes bright as they listened with parted lips, entranced in admiration. The older nuns had turned from their tasks and paused, in passing by to hear the pilgrim's story. Too well they knew the truths of what he spoke. Many a one among them had seen the smoke rising from the ruin of her father's roof. Many a one had a brother far away in the wild country, to whom her heart went out night and day, wondering if he were still among the living. But now the excitements of the wonderful day were over. The hours of the evening meal had come. The nuns of the cloister were assembled. On the dais sat the stately Abbess Adola, looking a princess indeed in her violet tunic, with the hood and cuffs of her long white robe trimmed with fur, and a snowy veil resting like a crown on her snowy hair. At her right hand was the honored guest, and at her left hand her grandson, the young Prince Gregor, a big manly boy just returned from school.
It is the turn of my grandson to read today. We shall see how much he has learned in the school. Read, Gregor. The place in the book is marked.
The tall lad rose from his seat and turned the pages of the manuscript. It was a copy of Jerome's version of the Scriptures in Latin, and the marked place was in the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians, the passage where he describes the preparation of the Christian as the arming of a warrior for glorious battle. The young voice rang out clearly, rolling the sonorous words without slip or stumbling to the end of the chapter.
My son, that was bravely read. Understandest thou what thou readest?
Surely, Father, it was taught me by the masters at Treves, and we have read the epistle clear through, from beginning to end, so that I almost know it by heart.
No, my son, that was not my meaning. When we pray, we speak to God. When we read, it is God who speaks to us. I ask whether thou hast heard what he has said to thee, in thine own words, in the common speech. Come, give us again the message of the warrior and his armor and his battle, in the mother tongue, so that all can understand it.
Take the book, my father, and read it for me. I cannot see the meaning plain, though I love the sound of the words. Religion I know, and the doctrines of our faith, and the life of priests and nuns in the cloister, for which my grandmother designed me, though it lets me little. And fighting I know, and the life of warriors and heroes, for I have read of it in Virgil and the ancients, and heard a bit from the soldiers at Treves, and I would fain taste more of it, for it likes me much. But how the two lives fit together, or what need there is of armor for a clerk in holy orders, I can never see. Tell me the meaning, for if there is a man in all the world that knows it, I am sure it is none other than thou.
So, does that make sense at all?
Sort of.
Well, St. Boniface is asking Gregor to explain to everyone in their own native language the meaning of St. Paul's words in the Bible about armor and all that. But Gregor is saying he knows all about religion and that his grandmother, the abbess, is basically prepping him to become a monk. And he likes the stories of warriors and battles that he's heard, but he doesn't get why someone talking about the Christian faith seems to be saying we need armor and weapons. So St. Boniface wants him to understand that, of course.
And that's going to be important later in the story, because is St. Paul talking about physical weapons and armor in the Bible?
No, spiritual.
Right. Anyway, let's keep going.
Let us first dismiss the others to their vespers, lest they should be weary.
The three at the head of the table were left alone in the darkening room. Then Winfried began to translate the parable of the soldier into the realities of life. He spoke of the combat with self, and of the wrestling with dark spirits and solitude. He spoke of the demons that men had worshipped for centuries in the wilderness, and whose malice they invoked against the stranger who ventured into the gloomy forest. Gods, they called them, and told strange tales of their dwelling among the impenetrable branches of the oldest trees and in the caverns of the shaggy hills, of their riding the wind horses and hurling spears of lightning against their foes. Gods they were not, but foul spirits of the air, rulers of the darkness. Was there not glory and honor in fighting with them, in daring their anger under the shield of faith, and putting them to flight with the sword of truth? What better adventure could a brave man ask than to go forth against them and wrestle with them and conquer them?
Look you, my friends, how sweet and peaceful is this coven tonight, on the eve of the nativity of the Prince of Peace. But out yonder in the wide forest, who knows what storms are raving tonight in the hearts of men, though all the woods are still? Who knows what haunts of wrath and cruelty and fear are closed tonight against the advent of the Prince of Peace? And shall I tell you what religion means to those who are called and chosen to dare and to fight and to conquer the world for Christ? It means to launch out into the deep. It means to go against the strongholds of the adversary. It means to struggle to win an entrance for their master everywhere. What helmet is strong enough for this strife, save the helmet of salvation? What breastplate can guard a man against these fiery darts but the breastplate of righteousness? What shoes can stand the wear of these journeys but the preparation of the gospel of peace? Come, Gregor, come, wear the forester's boots with me. This is the life to which we are called. Be strong in the Lord, a hunter of the demons, a subduer of the wilderness, a woodsman of the faith. Come.
So, what is Boniface asking Gregor to do? To come with him, right?
Right, on his missionary journeys through Germany. But his grandmother, the abbess, doesn't really like the idea, as you'll hear. She's worried about Gregor's safety. Let's go on with the story.
Nay, father, draw not the lad away from my side with these wild words. I need him to help me with my labors, to cheer my old age.
Do you need him more than the master does? And would you take the wood that is fit for a bow to make a distaff?
But I fear for the child. Thy life is too hard for him. He will perish with hunger in the woods.
Never have I seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread.
But the fierce pagans of the forest, they may pierce the boy with their arrows or dash out his brains with their axes. He is but a child, too young for the dangers of strife.
A child in years, but a man in spirit. And if the hero must fall early in the battle, he wears the brighter crown. Not a leaf withered, not a flower fallen.
The aged princess trembled a little. She drew Gregor close to her side and laid her hand gently on his brown hair.
I'm not sure he wants to lead me yet. Besides, there is no horse in the stable to give him now, and he cannot go as befits the grandson of a king.
Grandmother, dear grandmother, if thou wilt not give me a horse to ride with this man of God, I will go with him afoot.
Mom, do you want to read the next section?
Sure. And now, 2 years had passed to a day, almost to an hour, since that Christmas Eve. A little company of pilgrims, less than a score of men, were creeping slowly through the wide forest that rolled over the hills of central Germany. At the head of the band marched Winifred. Close behind him, keeping step like a familiar comrade, was the young Prince Gregor. Long marches through the wilderness had stretched his limbs and broadened his back, and made a man of him in stature as well as in spirit. Behind these leaders followed a pair of teamsters guiding a rude sledge, loaded with food and the equipage of the camp, and drawn by 2 big, shaggy horses. The sun dropped behind the treetops, and the darkness followed swiftly. Winfried turned and spoke to his followers in a cheerful voice that refreshed them like wine.
Courage, brothers, and forward yet a little. Well know I that the journey is weary, and my own heart wearies also for the home in England, where those I love are keeping feast this Christmas Eve. But we have work to do before we feast tonight, for this is the Yuletide, and the heathen people of the forest have gathered at the Thunder Oak of Geismar to worship their god, Thor. Strange things will be seen there, and deeds which make the soul black. And we are sent to lighten their darkness. Forward then, and let us stiffen up our feeble knees.
The men flattened their backs to draw the heavy loads and blew the frost from their nostrils as they pushed ahead. A drove of wolves howled faintly in the distance, but they were receding, and the sound soon died away.
Here is the Thunder Oak, and here the cross of Christ shall break the hammer of the false god Thor.
Withered leaves still clung to the branches of the oak, torn and faded banners of the fire that had been kindled in front of the tree. But the fire itself was invisible to Winfried and his companions. A great throng of people were gathered around in a half circle, their backs to the open glade, their faces toward the oak. Seen against that glowing background, it was but the silhouette of a crowd, vague, black, formless, mysterious.
So what's happening here?
Well, the people all around the area have gathered for a kind of pagan ritual, and there's a lot of them. One of St. Boniface's friends said he heard of it 3 days earlier, which shows that people from far away were planning to attend.
They approached unnoticed, for all the multitude were looking intently toward the fire at the foot of the oak.
Hail, ye sons of the forest! A stranger claims the warmth of your fire in the winter night.
Swiftly, and with a single motion, 1,000 eyes were bent upon the speaker. The semicircle opened, silently, in the middle. Winfried entered with his followers. It closed again behind them. Then, as they looked around the curving ranks, they saw that the hue of the assemblage was white, dazzling, radiant, solemn. White the robes of the mantles of those standing about, and white with fear and awe the faces of all who looked at them. And over all the flickering, dancing radiance of the flames played and glimmered, like a faint, vanishing tinge of blood on snow. The only figure untouched by the glow was the old priest, Hunrad, with his long, spectral robe, flowing hair and beard, and dead pale face, who stood with his back to the fire and advanced slowly to meet the strangers.
Who are you? Whence come you, and what seek you here?
From England, beyond the sea, have I come to bring you a greeting from that land, and a message from the All-Father, whose servant I am.
Welcome, then, and be silent, for what passes here is too high to wait, and must be done before the moon crosses the middle heaven. Unless indeed thou hast some sign or token from the gods. Canst thou work miracles?
Nay, miracles I have never wrought, though I have heard of many. But the All-Father has given no power to my hands, save such as belongs to common man.
Stand still, then, thou common man, and behold what the gods have called us hither to do. This night is the death night of the sun god, Baldur the beautiful, beloved of gods and men. This night is the hour of darkness, and the power of winter, of sacrifice and mighty fear. This night the great Thor, the god of thunder and war, to whom this oak is sacred, is grieved for the death of Baldur, and angry with his people because they have forsaken his worship. Long is it since an offering has been laid upon his altar, long since the roots of his holy tree have been fed with blood. More costly is the offering that shall cleanse your sin, more precious the crimson dew that shall send new life into this holy tree of blood. Thor claims your dearest and your noblest gift.
Hunrad moved nearer to the handful of children who stood watching the fire. Foremost among them was a boy like a sunbeam, slender and quick, with blithe brown eyes and laughing lips. The priest's hand was laid upon his shoulder. The boy turned and looked up in his face.
Here is the chosen one, the eldest son of the chief, the darling of the people. Hearken, Bernhard, wilt thou go to Valhalla, where the heroes dwell with the gods, to bear a message to Thor?
Yes, priest. I will go if my father bids me. Is it far away? Shall I run quickly? Must I take my bow and arrows for the wolves?
The boy's father, the chieftain Gundhar, stood among his bearded warriors, drew his breath deep, and leaned so heavily on the handle of his spear that the wood cracked. And his wife Irma, bending forward from the ranks of women, pushed the golden hair from her forehead with one hand. She dragged at the silver chain about her neck until the rough links pierced her flesh, and the red drops fell, unheeded, on the snow of her breast. A sigh passed through the crowd, like the murmur of the forest before the storm breaks, yet no one spoke but Hunrad.
Yes, my prince. Both bow and spear shalt thou have, for the way is long, and thou art a brave huntsman. But in darkness thou must journey for a little space, and with eyes blindfolded. Do thou fearest?
Not fear I, neither darkness, nor the great bear, nor the werewolf. For I am Gunhar's son, and the defender of my folk.
Then the priest led the child in his raiment of lamb's wool to a broad stone in front of the fire. He gave him his little bow tipped with silver, and his spear with shining head of steel. He bound the child's eyes with a white cloth, and bade him kneel beside the stone with his face to the east. Winfried moved noiselessly until he stood close behind the priest. The old man stooped to lift a black hammer of stone from the ground, the sacred hammer of the god Thor. Summoning all the strength of his withered arms, he swung it high in the air. It poised for an instant above the child's fair head, then turned to fall. One keen cry shrilled out from where the women stood.
Me! Take me! Not Bernhard!
The flight of the mother toward her child was swift as the falcon's swoop, but swifter still was the hand of the deliverer. Winfried's heavy staff thrust mightily against the hammer's handle as it fell. Sideways it glanced from the old man's grasp, and the black stone, striking on the altar's edge, split in twain. A shout of awe and joy rolled among the living circle. The branches of the oak shivered. The flames leapt higher. As the shout died away, the people saw the Lady Irma, with her arm clasped round her child, and above them on the altar stone Winfried, his face shining like the face of an angel.
So what just happened there?
The mom offered herself instead of her son, Bernhard, and St. Boniface knocked the hammer away with his staff.
Right. Mom, do you want to read the rest of the story?
The council was at a standstill. Anger and wonder, reverence and joy and confusion surged through the crowd. The old priest crouched by the altar, silent. The withered leaves on the oak rustled and whispered overhead. The fire flared and sank again. Angry voices clashed against each other and fell like opposing waves. Then the chieftain Gunhar struck the earth with his spear and gave his decision.
All have spoken, but none are agreed. There is no voice of the council. Keep silence now, and let the stranger speak. His words shall give us judgment, whether he is to live or to die.
Winfried lifted himself high upon the altar, drew a roll of parchment from his bosom, and began to read.
A letter from the great Bishop of Rome, who sits on a golden throne, to the people of the forest, Hessians and Thuringians, Franks and Saxons.
So, St. Boniface is about to read this letter from the Bishop of Rome, right? Who's that?
The Pope?
Right, and the people have enough Christian knowledge to know that's a pretty big deal.
Winfried went on to read the letter, translating it into the speech of the people.
We have sent unto you our brother Boniface, and appointed him your bishop, that he may teach you the only true faith, and baptize you, and lead you back from the ways of error to the path of salvation. Hearken to him in all things like a father. Bow your hearts to his teaching. He comes not for earthly gain, but for the gain of your souls. Depart from evil works. Worship not the false gods, for they are devils. Offer no more bloody sacrifices, nor eat the flesh of horses, but do as our brother Boniface commands you. Build a house for him, that he may dwell among you, and a church where you may offer your prayers to the only living God, the Almighty King of heaven.
It was a splendid message, proud, strong, peaceful, loving. The dignity of the words imposed mightily upon the hearts of the people. They were quieted as men who have listened to a lofty strain of music.
Tell us, then, what is the word that thou bringest to us from the Almighty? What is thy counsel for the tribes of the woodland on this night of sacrifice?
This is the word, and this is the counsel. Not a drop of blood shall fall tonight, save that which pity has drawn from the breast of your princess, in love for her child. For this is the birth night of the Christ, Son of the All-Father and Savior of mankind. Since he has come to earth, the bloody sacrifices must cease. The dark Thor, on whom you vainly call, is dead. See, my brothers, you call this tree his oak. Does he dwell here? Does he protect it?
The people stirred uneasily. Women covered their eyes.
Thor, take vengeance! Thor!
Winfried beckoned to Gregor.
Bring the axes, thine and one for me. Now, young woodsman, show thy craft. The king tree of the forest must fall, and swiftly, or all is lost.
The two men took their places facing each other, one on each side of the oak. Firmly they grasped the axe hilts and swung the shining blades.
Tree god, art thou angry? Thus we smite thee.
Tree god, art thou mighty? Thus we fight thee.
The axe heads glittered in their rhythmic flight, like eagles circling above their quarry. The broad flakes of wood flew from the deepening gashes in the side of the oak. The huge trunk quivered. There was a shuddering in the branches. Out of the stillness of the winter night, a mighty rushing noise sounded overhead. Was it the ancient gods on their white battle steeds, with their black hounds of wrath and their arrows of lightning sweeping through the air to destroy their foes? A strong, whirling wind passed over the treetops. It gripped the oak by its branches and tore it from its roots. Backward it fell like a ruined tower, groaning and crashing as it split asunder in 4 great pieces. Winfried let his axe drop and bowed his head for a moment in the presence of almighty power. Then he turned to the people.
Here is the timber, already felled and split for your new building. On this spot shall rise a chapel to the true God and his servant, St. Peter.
His eyes fell on a young fir tree, standing straight and green, with its top pointing toward the stars amid the divided ruins of the fallen oak.
And here is the living tree, with no stain of blood upon it. That shall be the sign of your new worship. See how it points to the sky. Let us call it the tree of the Christ child. Take it up and carry it to the chieftain's hall. You shall go no more into the shadows of the forest to keep your feasts with secret rites of shame. You shall keep them at home with laughter and song and rites of love. The thunder oak has fallen, and I think the day is coming where there shall not be a home in all Germany where the children are not gathered around the green fir tree to rejoice in the birth night of Christ.
So they took the little pine tree from its place, and when they had come to the house of Gunther, he bade them throw open the doors of the hall and set the tree in the midst of it. They kindled lights among the branches until it seemed to be tangled full of fireflies. Then Winfried stood beside the chair of Gunhard and told the story of Bethlehem, of the babe in the manger, of the shepherds on the hills, of the host of angels in their midnight song. All the people listened, charmed into stillness. But the boy Bernhard, on Irma's knee, folded by her soft arm, grew restless as the story lengthened and began to prattle softly at his mother's ear. His eyes were heavy with sleep, but he heard the last words of Winfried as he spoke of the angelic messengers, flying over the hills of Judea and singing as they flew. The child wondered and dreamed and listened. Suddenly his face grew bright. He put his lips close to Irma's cheek again.
Oh, Mother, do not speak. Do you hear them? Those angels have come back again. They are singing now behind the tree.
And some say that it was true, but others say that it was only Gregor and his companions at the lower end of the hall chanting their Christmas hymn.
That was a good story.
Glad you liked it. And we still have the beautiful tradition of the Christmas tree, and especially the story behind its meaning, of God loving us so much he would come to earth as a baby and become one of us.